Hello, hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for being so punctual. We should start exactly on time. It's another 30 seconds or so. Good evening, Aparajita. Good evening, Preeta. So good to see you here. Good evening, Priyanka. We'll wait for another 30 seconds and then we should start on time. Right. Okay. I think we should be punctual. It's 6:31. We're going to start right off. Good evening, everyone. I'm Bhakti Shah, the Director of Outreach at Krea University, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome all of you this evening. This evening is especially curated for the students who have been accepted to Krea University for the cohort of 2024 from rounds 1 and 2. We want you to know that you've been selected from among a large pool of extremely talented applicants from India and abroad. Kriya prides itself on its rigorous admission process, which is truly one of a kind in the country. So congratulations once again for making it through. This evening, we want to celebrate your achievement by giving you an opportunity to listen to and interact with two great minds. Dr. Sundar Ramaswamy, the Vice Chancellor of Krea University, and Dr. Raghuram Rajan, who was the 23rd Governor of the Reserve Bank of India. Dr. Rajan is also an advisor on the Governing Council and a member of the Academic Council at Krea University. I also want to extend a very warm welcome to the parents of our cohort of 2024 and an equally warm welcome to the principals and counselors of the schools from where we have selected students this year. We know how hard you have all worked to prepare your students for their futures, and we could not have imagined this evening without you. Last, but certainly not the least, I would like to welcome my colleagues from Krea University, including our prolific divisional chairs, faculty, and key department heads who are the best in their domains and make Krea what it is. Since inception, Krea's interwoven ethos has been led by Vice Chancellor Dr. Sundar Ramaswamy. Dr. Ramaswamy is a PhD in economics from Purdue University, an MA in economics from the Delhi School of Economics, and a BA honors in economics from St. Stephen's College, University of Delhi. Dr. Ramaswamy is on leave from the Middlebury College, one of the top nationally ranked liberal arts colleges in the United States, where he's a distinguished college professor of international economics. Over the past 29 years, he has held various visiting positions at the Madras School of Economics, including the position of director. He's also held positions at Vanderbilt University, the Institute of Financial Management and Research, which is also a part of Krea University, Purdue University, and the World Bank USA. He has been involved with World Bank projects on various aspects of economic reforms in India. He currently serves as a chairman of the board and a member of the executive committee of the Asia Foundation, which is the largest US-based international development nonprofit organization focused on Asia. He's also the vice chair and member of the executive committee of the board of directors for the American International School in Chennai. Dr. Ramaswamy's achievements and credentials run pages long, but without any further ado, I invite Dr. Ramaswamy to please address the cohort of 2024 from rounds 1 and 2.
Thank you, Bhakti, for that very generous introduction. And let me add my words of welcome to the students in the cohort of 2024. And what a great feeling you must have that you at least have gotten into a place of your choice. I also want to acknowledge the parents and the principals and my colleagues at Krea for being here. And it's a wonderful feeling for us. I sit with the admissions committee, and the process is very unique and very rigorous. And congratulations to all of you, especially for rounds 1 and 2 who have made it and are part of Kriya. And I also want to sort of throw a challenge, because we are a young university, and so even though you're part of the third cohort, I think you will find what's also an amazing opportunity is to help shape the university. Ms. Bhakti has reminded you my undergraduate background. When I joined St. Stephen's College, it was completing a centenary. That had a certain credibility and an appeal to it, that I was part of an institution that was very well known. But in terms of the changes that I could affect, and we are looking for change makers, there was not a lot. I was very busy at college, but there was not a lot. Whereas I know from watching what the first years and the second years are doing, you really get to shape Kriya. Let me leave you 3 thoughts. The mission of Kriya, when we coined it a few years back, was to prepare humanity for an unpredictable future. We were thinking about the 4th industrial revolution. We were thinking about climate change. We did not anticipate COVID-19. But the ethos on which Kriya was built was all about preparing you, and consequently with us, how do we shape our curriculum and co-curriculum to deal with a world that is so changing so rapidly. And so in some ways, 2020 and 2021 have really put the test. And I think we've come through with flying colors, because we have attracted students and we have attracted faculty and staff to sort of embrace this ethos of the changing and unpredictable future. The second thought is the origin of the word Kriya itself. It's supposed to represent creativity in action. And if you write Kriya in Sanskrit or Hindi, it also means action, as you know. And so we were looking for students who really are very creative and very action-oriented, in the sense it's the combination of the right brain and the left brain. And we wanted to sort of get students who really can walk the talk of creativity in action. And the last thing is Kriya's unique curriculum, which you can see, depending on your perspective, against my name, the interwoven logo, right? So Kriya is sort of a pioneering and pushing forward what we call interwoven learning, which is combining arts and science, East and West, technology with history, futuristic look with a nod to the past. In other words, we sort of very actively rebelled against very hyper specialization at this age. All of us have come through, I went through an Indian school and an Indian college, and in many ways, the school system and the college system still does not allow for an incredible variety of choice. You either are a science student or a commerce student or an art student. And I think as the brain is still evolving at this age, what I've learned over the years dealing with undergraduates is that students are still trying to form what their interests are. They're trying to discover themselves, and they realize that they have multiple strengths and multiple interests. And so to box up students on the very first day of college careers into a history major or a physics major in the academic council, and you'll be hearing from Dr. Rajan soon, we just did not believe that that was the right way to start, especially preparing you for this unpredictable future. So what we really want are people who come in ready to embrace the full spectrum of knowledge, everything from philosophy to science to math to computational thinking to data analytics to ethical decision making to literature and the arts to creative expression, the entire set of our core and skills, which is foundational. And then alone, do you decide, do I want to be an economics major? Do I want to be a history minor? Do I want to be a computer science major? How does this link to what I want to do after Kriya? And what is it that I will do in addition to classes, whether it's co-curricular, extracurricular, and all the other activities? Because the other thing we are very conscious about, the faculty and staff, is that Kriya is about developing the whole individual. Academics is rigorous, it's top-notch, and it's really important, but academics is not the only thing. It's what you do with your friends, it's what you do with your faculty, it's what you do with your community, whether it's in Sri City or in other parts of India, or pretty soon we've had students as travel restrictions get eased up, preparing to go to other parts of the world. So the idea of community is also, it telescopes. It starts from a very micro area of the campus and then it evolves. And so we want students who can actually make changes at the ground level, right? So it's not just what you study in the classroom and how you study. It is really about thinking. It's how do you think? Why do you think what you think? You know, I'm reminded of a very famous quotation by T.S. Eliot, who was the well-known British American poet, who coined this maybe in 1920. And I think it's maybe even more relevant today, right? And the quotation goes as follows: where is the wisdom that is lost in all the knowledge? Where is the knowledge that is lost in all the information? Let me repeat that. Where is the wisdom that is lost in all the knowledge? And where is the knowledge that is lost in all the information? To which I, as an economist, add, where is the information that is lost in all the data? So we are awash with data because we live in the fourth industrial revolution where the availability of data and the computational power of data is incredibly adept. And so much so that you will study data analytics in your very first year. And understanding data or learning about data, it's like learning a language, whether you learn Hindi or Sanskrit or French or German. I believe it's very, very important, no matter what your interest is, to understand the data that we live in. But separating out what is the information that data spits out is important. But maybe even more important, thinking about that quotation, is the jump one has to make from information to knowledge. I remember as a kid growing up in New Delhi, and it was in a very different era when most of you probably not have even been born. Teachers thought my brain was an empty vessel into which they poured information. And I had to figure it out and spit it back out in an exam. The last 12, 15 years, ever since the advent of the smartphone revolution, anyone with a phone and an internet connection has access to pretty much the library of information. So delivering information is not what teaching is about and should be about. It's really the jump from information to knowledge. So what you have at places like Krea are exactly how knowledge is disseminated. And that's what you find from our faculty. And so if anything you remember the mission of Kriya, you remember interwoven learning, but do remember what Eliot said maybe about 100 years ago, and try and figure out the journey from data to information to knowledge to wisdom, right? And that's really, in some ways, I think the purpose of Kriya is to really create an educational paradigm that you will get a degree, you'll get your major, but it's really preparing you for an unpredictable future. And more than that, is preparing you as a whole individual. So let me, with that, congratulate you for getting admissions through round 1 and 2. And I really hope you'll join us and help build Kriya in the years ahead. And I see Dr. Rajan has just signed on. And so I'll turn it over to Bhakti so that we can welcome him. And then we'll be available to take questions and answers. Great. On to you, Bhakti.
Thank you, Dr. Me, for sharing your vision and thoughts with all of us. And now it is my honor to welcome Dr. Raghuram Rajan, our special guest for this evening. He joins us from Chicago, where it is fairly early in the morning. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Rajan. Dr. Rajan needs no introduction, but please indulge me. Dr. Rajan is the Catherine Dussac Miller Distinguished Service Professor of Finance at Chicago Booth. He was the 23rd Governor of the Reserve Bank of India. Between 2003 and 2006, Dr. Rajan was the Chief Economist and Director of Research at the International Monetary Fund. He was the President of the American Finance Association in 2011 and is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. In 2003, Dr. Rajan won the inaugural Fisher Black Prize awarded by the American Finance Association for contributions to the theory and practice of finance by an economist under the age of 40. In February 2010, NASSCOM named him a Global Indian at its 7th Annual Global Leadership Awards. In 2010, his book, Fault Lines: How Hidden Fractures Still Threaten the World Economy, was awarded the Financial Times and McKinsey Business Book of the Year award. In 2014, he was conferred the Best Central Bank Governor Award by Euromoney magazine and Central Banking Financial Journal. He completed his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering at the IIT Delhi. He pursued his postgrad diploma in business administration at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and his doctoral program in management at the MIT Sloan School of Management. Thank you, Dr. Rajan, for joining us this evening. I can tell you that students are really excited to hear from you. So just to let you know, once again, in this room, along with the students who have been accepted from rounds 1 and 2 for the cohort of 2024, we also have their parents and principals and counselors joining us. So without further ado, the virtual floor is all yours.
You're on mute. That's the most famous words during this era of Zoom. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone, depending on where you are. Let me add my words, maybe a few brief words to what Sundar has already said about the mission of Kriya. We hope that for all you young students who decide to join, this is the beginning of a journey, a voyage of discovery. And what we hope is that you certainly will learn about the world around us, but also make many good friends amongst your fellow students, the staff, and the teachers, of course, at Kriya. This is a voyage of discovery also about yourself, about learning who you really are, about challenging yourself and finding out how far you can go, what you're really capable of. And the hope is Kriya will open up your horizons, but also provide you with an endless boundary. It will take you as far as you want to go, as far as you let it take you. Now, that obviously leads to the question of what can a university teach you? And Sundar has already talked about the fact that, yeah, I mean, certainly data, facts, you will absorb it. You are absorbing it even as we speak. And there's so much to learn. The facts keep changing. So do the tools. I mean, you will learn many tools in every subject, and the tools also keep changing. Today, it's fast Fourier transforms. Tomorrow, it's something else. Every new subject requires a new set of tools. And of course, everything falls within broader concepts and frameworks. And those also keep changing. For example, in economics, the rage today is some kind of a grand new Keynesianism. Let us spend till we drop. You need all this. You need the facts, the tools, the frameworks, but as Sundar has said, you also need to deal with change. And change means that you can't rely on the old comfortable facts and the old comfortable frameworks. You need to be able to adapt to the new ones that are emerging without really knowing what they might be. 50 years from now, we will know what was right and what was wrong at this point in time. But you will have to have a theory of knowledge which is based on evolving knowledge and without certainty as to what is right or what is wrong, but with a basic uh, capability of trying to look at the data, look at the incoming data, look at all the commentary that is coming out, and to try and develop your own worldview. So this means really dealing with very unstructured problems with a huge amount of uncertainty surrounding them. For example, if you are a executive in a firm today, you really are trying to figure out what the post-COVID world looks like, but you have no idea how human behavior will change. You have no idea how government behavior will change. How will government stressed by a huge amount of debt react? Are they going to change taxes? Are they going to, have difficulties financing themselves? And you're trying to make these decisions when everything is moving. You need to make decisions. Not deciding is not an option in most circumstances. And this is where Kriya's emphasis on unstructured problems but approaching them through various disciplines, through what physics tells us, what chemistry tells us, what economics tells us, what philosophy tells us, and trying to draw from each of these. This is the concept of interwoven learning, but also interwoven discovery. How do you find the answers? And how do you find the answers with others? One of the things we often miss out in this individualized learning in colleges is that in reality, in the real world, you're often working with many others, and you're trying to reach a collective it's a collective attempt at an answer. So how to find the answer with others? How do you work in groups? How do you help each other? Now, it's not just knowledge. It's also about what it means to be a true citizen. What is your civic responsibility? What should your ethical frame and your moral values be? Often in college, we sort of leave these as something our students will absorb from home. But every day when our students are in a university, they are learning from seeing the culture around them, from seeing the behavior of people around them, what their civic responsibility and their ethical frame should be. And if the culture at a university is wrong, it equips people with the wrong attitudes, many with the wrong attitudes for life. So one of our aims at Kriya is to create at least a culture at the university which allows you to get a sensible and an important and strong value frame which will equip you for life. And this means respect and tolerance for the others and their viewpoints. You have to be prepared to listen. You have to be prepared to tolerate. You have to be prepared to hear something that strikes at the very soul of your beliefs, and still be prepared to debate in a reasoned way, not say my sentiments are hurt, I cannot talk to you, I should ban you, I should suppress you. There is a duty to debate in the large universities to try and reach a broader understanding, to know that, even if you don't agree with anything the other person says, you should defend the right to say it, but also try and understand why is it that a human being is saying something which is so diametrically opposite, and why is it that you're angered? Perhaps it lies in your own beliefs. It doesn't mean that you have a shifting framework, but your framework is strong enough that you can listen to others and either persuade them, or at the very least understand that what they're saying has really no value when it's closely examined for your own belief system. It also means that you have to learn that your civic responsibility occasionally means you have to act. You cannot close your eyes to injustice. And occasionally, it requires you to speak up. It requires you to say, I don't support this. I think we need to change. And students in every country have always been an important part of the change. This doesn't mean fighting for vested interests, but to be able to write, to able to speak, to able to push for what is broadly right. And hopefully, Kriya will create the environment where many of you will learn to do that. Now, you are, if you decide to join Kriya, we will be part of the first few batches. Already, the initial batches have been creating traditions, competitions, celebrations, even pranks and hoaxes. Some of you may have seen they've painted some parts of Kriya itself as part of some of their work. They've also created norms. There are lots of wonderful stories of how our students are helping each other. Students who don't have strength in certain areas of study are being helped by other students who have had a stronger, preparation. And this norm of mutual help, of kindness, of celebrating each other's success is something that you will participate in and hopefully build on, because each one's success adds to the collective success of the institution. So let me not go on too long. I want to answer questions, but you young people come into a university at a time that the world is challenging. Clearly, the pandemic has resulted in a tragic loss of lives, but it's also created massive turmoil for so many. Uh, every pre-existing fault line has been exacerbated. You know, Matthew said, "For those who have, more will be given, but from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away." It seems as if that is what the pandemic is doing. If you look at the tragic situation of migrants in India earlier on last year, or today you look at the situation of kids who have been out of school for a year. And I'm not talking about people from a upper middle class background, but I'm talking about the really poor kids from a basti who've been trying to make do with cell phones, trying to stay abreast of lessons. These are people who are suffering, who will suffer because they will be held back. And you know, developing countries, unfortunately, have been hit far harder than rich countries. So all of us, to varying degrees, have suffered during this pandemic, but some have suffered much more than others. And unfortunately, that is also the situation which was emerging before the pandemic. The rise of new technologies is empowering a class of people, but disempowering many. And so, in a sense, our challenge is, how do we use all the tools, including the new technologies and the new knowledge that we get, to make a difference in the world, to try and fight the forces that are dividing people, that are shutting voices, that are erecting barriers to trade and investment and opportunity, and thereby restricting opportunity for the many. How do you broaden participation and opportunity for all? That will be the problem that you will fight while at university and when you graduate. And you who have been admitted are uniquely privileged in being able to equip yourself to be part of the solution. And I hope you will certainly be part of it. Let me stop, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. It's interesting that a lot of the things that you've said, finds a lot of resonance in the kind of questions that we've been asked today by students. So in the next segment, I'm going to call upon a few students that we have selected. The questions have been selected, and they will ask you those questions directly. And we have them on right now. So without further ado, Mihir Joshi, if you could switch on your camera and go ahead and ask your question. Just introduce yourself, Mihir, and the school that you're from, and go ahead and ask your question.
Firstly, hello, sir. I'm Mihir from Bangalore. I study in class 12 and I study at the Presidency College. Thank you to everyone at Krea for giving me this wonderful opportunity. And here's my question. In your capacity with the government of India, how did you strike a balance between market reform while balancing social welfare schemes as well? Thank you.
I think that if you're asking with respect to the future, you have to be cognizant of the fact that any kind of change will bring opposition. That's the nature of change. People are comfortable with what they have and don't want to see it change unless they can be persuaded that the change will bring a lot of benefit. So change has to be strategically structured and negotiated. You won't take 100% of the people with you, but you can take more with you if you have a dialogue and say, here are the things we need to do. Here are the protections while we're doing it. And these are the ways that we will make sure that it doesn't adversely affect any single constituency. Many of you may pay a small price, but the larger gain and the eventual gain to you will be significantly greater. And the nature of many reforms is that if it's actually carried out, the benefits over the longer run are significant. But you have to get people to wait till then, and you have to also persuade people that they won't be completely hit along the way. So what are the safeguards you can have without compromising the whole reform? So how do I persuade you that you will not lose out? That's really an important part, and that's where dialogue comes in. The whole point about democratic dialogue is we need to persuade each other. We can't just say this is my way or the highway.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. The next question is from Adrian. Adrian, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, so I'm Adrian John. I am from the SM Shetty International School in Mumbai. And this is my question to you. Do you believe that an inverted yield curve is an accurate indicator of a recession, especially in today's time?
So you have studied your economics. An inverted yield curve, for those who haven't been following economics so closely, is when longer term interest rates are lower than shorter term interest rates. And typically that tends to signal, typically not always, that tends to signal that interest rates will come down. However, you have to understand the situations in which that happens. So for example, when Paul Volcker was trying to fight inflation, inflation was really high. So he took short-term interest rates up to 15, 16, 17%. And because the market believed that he would succeed, the long-term interest rates came down. Now, certainly he sort of did that by in part creating sort of a recession. But the longer term was actually quite strong and was significant growth. So that's a situation where the near term was recessionary, but the longer term, because inflation was going to come down, because interest rates would come down, in fact, the long term yields were suggesting that things would actually get better rather than worse. So circumstances matter, but yeah, it's a reasonable indicator if the circumstances, if you put together the pieces and it seems to be consistent, then sure.
All right, Adrian, I hope that answers your question. And up next, we have Meghnad. Meghnad, go ahead and ask your question.
So thank you. So I'm Meghnad Dasgupta. So it's truly an honor to talk to you, and I thank Kriya for giving me this opportunity. So my question was that does the sale of government assets such as BSNL or Air India signal a monetary mismanagement, or does it raise confidence in the Indian economy? So, yeah.
Another economist. Meghnad, I don't think it necessarily signals something. You could see a situation where a government sells some of its companies as a signal of a government that is in dire straits as far as finances go. But that need not be the case. It could be that the government recognizes that repurposing those assets, selling them into either private hands or making them public companies which are governed more widely without a single proprietor, might be both efficient, increase the productivity of those companies, but also helpfully raise resources which it can use to pay down some debt and therefore reduce the necessity of going to the public for taxes. So again, the answer here, as with all economic answers, depends. The answer is sort of it depends. There have been privatization processes which have focused on improving efficiency, and you might argue that Air India would benefit from an improvement not just in efficiency but also in distancing from government interference, which would allow the good workers of Air India to do their job without necessarily having to kowtow to thus and such civil servant or politician. At the same time, there could be situations where the public sector enterprise is bleeding the government, and the improvement in efficiency is not only urgent, but is really important in order to cut the bleeding. And some entities, because they're aligned with the government, because they have a call on the government purse, don't necessarily have an incentive to change. So what if we make losses? So what if there are frauds? So what if there are, there is incompetence? The government will continue bailing us out. And in a poor country, that is a question that governments have to ask. How long am I going to support this bleeding with taxpayer revenues, when in fact this is a privileged section of society relatively? So these are all questions. Again, if you want to make change, the earlier question of you need democratic dialogue matters.
Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, Dr. Rajan, we have a lot of economists in the making in this room. Next question is from Caroline. Caroline, go ahead and ask your question.
Good evening, sir. My name is Caroline Joseph, and I'm from St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. I hope you and your family are doing well. I, for one, am extremely thrilled to have been given such an incredible opportunity today. My question for you is, what are the top items in your assessment to make the neobank sector successful in India, especially given our demographic and digitalization trends? Thank you.
Let me, before you go, what do you mean by the new bank sector?
The fintech.
Okay.
Yeah.
So fintech is an exciting new segment in many countries, and often the way fintech is making a difference is by trying to combine a variety of activities, starting with payments. When I do your payments for you as an individual or as a small business, I get to see a bigger picture of who you are. I understand what your broader business is, what your revenues are, what your costs are, and get a sense of your credit worthiness. So that's one. The second is many of them also have an interest in platforms in Alibaba, Jio, whatever. You have a platform which helps the small retailer sell their goods, and so you get both the you get the real side in terms of selling, and you're helping with the logistics, you're helping with the sales, but you're also helping with the payments. And then that allows you to do a third thing, which is credit. Yes, I'm going to provide that small merchant selling on my platform working capital so that they can actually expand their activities and sell more, so that they can source from places that they haven't been able to source before. And I, as the platform, can act as a kind of intermediary, helping them tie up with these foreign suppliers, etc., because I'm well known and I'm standing behind this. So essentially, the fintech can expand business considerably, can expand credit considerably, based not on real collateral, not on, most lending, when you don't know a person, is based on, do they give you collateral? Do they give you their gold so that you can give a gold loan? But it's based on the collateral of reputation and information. If they default on you, you cut them off. And for them, that loss of access to credit can be a very big loss. So they're willing to work with you. Now, this, I think, has certainly a long way to go in India and can be very successful. We do have to keep an eye on issues of monopoly and antitrust. How sort of much power does the platform get over the small enterprise? How much does it prevent it from accessing other platforms? How much does it squeeze them? If we can take care of that and make sure that unfair business practices aren't followed by these platforms, that then I don't see why we can't have a thriving sector. We have one of the best payment systems in the world for retail payments through the universal payment interface. And if you look at the payments that are happening on it, it is growing by leaps and bounds. And so I would think that we are well positioned to encourage this industry and to get much more lending and credit.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. Next question is from Anurag. Anurag, you may proceed.
Good morning, Dr. Rajan. My name is Anurag Kumar Nayan. I'm from RN Poda School, Mumbai. So, sir, my question to you is, what would the Indian economy look like when I turn 30? What can we expect?
Well, that's around 10 years, give or take 2 or 3 years from now. I think that we are already one of the top 5 economies based on purchasing power parity. We will probably enter the top 5 if we maintain reasonable rates of growth, even based on market exchange rates. I think we are going to see a lot more of some of the trends your fellow students have been talking about: more digitization, more automation, going not just from the cities, but into the more rural areas. We will see a lot more of that. We will see e-commerce spread more. That seems like just a straight line projection of where we are. Hopefully, what we will also see is better infrastructure built out. We will have more mid-sized cities increasing in size, some stabilization of the size of our mega cities. They really shouldn't grow much more than where they are. But we will see also hopefully more people leaving agriculture. Agriculture becomes more remunerative for the people left behind, and people leaving agriculture, but not necessarily migrating to the cities, but doing a lot more value-added work around agriculture and in rural areas, that we have much stronger rural industries. I would also hope to see that India becomes more of a leader in some areas. For example, education. There's no reason why we can't become a world leader in education. Why we can't do a lot more in manufacturing. I wouldn't necessarily sort of bang my fist on the table and say we should become a manufacturing superpower. There are other ways of growing, but we can do a lot more, especially if we improve our logistics. So, I would see stronger roads, railroads, airports, air connections, all that combined to make us a stronger manufacturing power. So yeah, a lot of progress. I think our weakness has always been, the possibility, and this is a weakness not just for India, for any emerging market, is bad politics, and we have to be sort of cognizant that we need to focus on movement forward and not get sort of sidelined by divisions.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. Next question is from Ananya. Ananya, go ahead.
Good morning, sir. It's an honor to meet you. My name is Ananya Mishra. I'm studying at RN Poda in Mumbai. I want to pursue psychology. So my question for you is, as an economist, what role do you think psychology will play in the future?
Well, my wife is a psychologist, behavioral decision sciences, and it's a huge field. It's clearly a place where you're trying to understand behavior, and increasingly economists are trying to understand what the psychologists know, because behavior is so central to economic decision making also, whether it's the behavior of markets or the behavior of crowds. There's so many things you can do with a degree in psychology. I presume you're not asking me for career choices, because the world is open to you, whether you work for media, whether you work for a company, in marketing, whether you work for one of the Fintech organizations. For example, in Fintech, one of the key issues is, how can I get a better sense of your creditworthiness? Well, one way I can get a better sense of creditworthiness is figuring out what your social network is. But how do I decide what elements of your social network are positive for you to get credit, and what elements of your social network are negative, sort of make you more of a lafanga rather than a real, hardworking young individual? And so that's psychology. That's one place where clearly, your skills will be in use. There's also, fighting the dark side. Why do we have trolls on the internet? Why is there this hysteria that emerges in some cases? Why are some people seemingly immune to any knowledge or information? They live in a world with a worldview which seems so at odds with the data that we see every day. How can they how can their minds be cloaked? And that's psychology. Uh, great great dictators have figured it out, and so it's important for us to understand that better. So lots of scope. You will not be lacking for work to do.
Thank you. Next question is from Stuti. Stuti, go ahead.
Hello everyone. It's an honor to be here today. I'm Stuti and I'm from Modern High School for Girls, Kolkata. And Dr. Rajan, my question to you is, what do you think the next few years will bring for the youth in terms of education, and how will Kriya be different from the norm?
Well, I think Sundar must have sort of already highlighted the many ways that Kriya wants to be different. I mean, to some extent, if you join Kriya, it's your role to be part of the difference. So this is not some body outside saying this is how we'll be different. It's a real living creative organization, and you have to constantly be thinking, how are we going to be different? How are we going to do things differently and say things differently? Hopefully, these are differences in the right direction. These are differences that make it a more ethical university, where cheating is just simply unheard of, where you go out of your way to help your fellow students. You see that a variety of people from different walks of life have been admitted, all of them very smart, all of them very bright, but not all of them have had the same opportunities to succeed in the past. And you are part of a group which figures out, okay, here are my strengths, and here is how I can make a difference to their lives. And it's not just within the university, but also outside. You're part of a Sri City complex, where you will find different kinds of people doing different kinds of things, and you will have people coming into the university from outside. And I'm sure we will go to direct on campus within hopefully months, but virus willing. And I think you will see that there are all the people coming in have a variety of issues themselves. How do you sort of look at those? How do you do projects that try and alleviate some of their problems? Those are all things that I think will happen. More broadly, I think the wonder of communications and information technology has made possible these kinds of meetings. I wouldn't have a chance to meet you in this brief interaction if it wasn't for Zoom. And I think this will make it possible, much more possible, for you to have high level interactions with people around the world. It's much easier for people who have busy lives to commit to an hour spent with students than to travel a couple of days to Sri City. So I think this particularly benefits more universities which have bright students who want to learn and can now access places around the world. So I think that's one important change in of course, it also puts more pressure on the teachers. If I have to rethink whether I'm going to do my lecture and then my give homework. Do I need to do much less lecturing in class because the students can get access to a variety of other lectures also, but focus more on value addition in class itself? What is that value addition? Is it passively listening to lectures, or is it working collectively on problems? I mean, these are all things that we're all trying to grapple with and trying to understand how we can make technology make education better. But remember that, since the age of our rishis, the way of education has been we sit in the Gurukul and listen to the rishi give his or her lecture, mostly, unfortunately, his lectures. And today, we can change that model. And that's really the challenge of education. How do we change that model while keeping the benefits of the old and incorporating the value of technology?
Thank you. Sarah, you're up next.
Good morning, sir. My name is Sarah. I'm studying at the Valley School, Bangalore. And my question for you is, for an aspiring student of economics, what would be the most important advice you could give out?
I would say, what I would tell anybody, which is, by all means, pay attention to your subject, read widely. Don't just restrict yourself to the textbooks. Read newspapers, read magazines like The Economist, get a sense of the wider world. But also, and this is important, don't restrict yourself to economics. Read psychology, read philosophy, read chemistry. The whole point of interwoven learning is a lot of the advances, a lot of the new knowledge comes at the intersections. And if you do know a variety of areas, you can actually benefit. And most important and last point is, the fact that you are interested in economics is a good thing, but you may not continue to be interested in economics. So be prepared that you might find math suddenly much more interesting. So don't sort of at this point, you're still very young by the looks of you. Don't lock yourself in to a stream or an area. Keep yourself open to the possibility you can do a lot else, and then figure out there's always time to lock yourself in later.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. I'm aware of the time, so we have 2 more questions to go. So if, with your permission, we'll just go ahead and take them. Is that all right?
I will offer shorter answers.
Sure. So Amog, you're up next.
Good morning, sir. My name is Amok Kumar Mishra. I study at Kando International School, Bangalore. And my question to you is, what is your view on the creation of jobs when it comes at a cost to the environment? For example, opening coal mining jobs.
Well, that's a pretty dramatic sort of situation. There are less dramatic situations where any development comes at the expense of some change in the environment, often to the detriment of the environment. Right? Think of a road. You build a road, obviously, with cars speeding on it. A lot of little creatures trying to cross it get killed. You can see the roadkill every day. That's a cost to the environment. I think this is not a black and white situation where you can say environment, you can say jobs. You really have to find a compromise between the two. And there are situations where some small tweaks in design can make development much less environmentally damaging, and that's important to think of that. And there are some places where you say, well, I will see a few I will see some disruption to the environment, but this is not going to be as bad as seeing a lot of kids grow up without incomes and being stunted in their growth and so on. That makes more sense for me to tackle. So in a really underdeveloped area, you might think that the trade-off is a little different from an overdeveloped area. I said I'll keep the answer short. It's really about trade-offs, not about black and white.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. As promised, last question from Sashwat. Sashwat, thank you for your patience. Go ahead, ask your question.
Hello, Dr. Rajan. I'm Sashwat. I'm from Bangalore and I study in Oak Ridge International School. Firstly, I'd like to say that my family really admires your work and we have multiple copies of your book, I Do What I Do, and The Third Pillar at home. So on behalf of them, I'd like to ask you, what are some books you would recommend to people who want to do a deep dive into economics and finance?
It's a good question. There are a whole host of books you could look at, to get a sense of what people are talking about today. A reasonable starting point might be to look at the FT's business books of the year. They basically put out a list every year. If you look at the short list, that's about 10, 15 books, maybe no, five or six books. Look at what they're talking about and see what interests you. That'll give you a sense of what's current. Obviously, authors who have written in the past have been very important. John Kenneth Galbraith is someone I used to love to read because of his witty style. It's a little dated now, but certainly still pays reading. And if you want a experience of a unique mind, do read Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations. It's actually quite readable. You have to invest at this stage, but it's very readable and it's actually a great work. So that's a short list, and I should probably sign off to get to my next appointment.
Yes.
But
Yes.
Thank you very much, all of you, and good luck in your choices. I hope you will make the right choice, whatever it is, and good luck going forward.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rajan, for joining us. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye. All right. So we do have, thank you, kids. Once again, I hope you enjoy this experience. We'll see you soon, all of you. We do have a few more questions that have come in from parents and a few other students. And I could not think of anyone better than Dr. Ramaswamy to answer those. So Dr. Ramaswamy, over to you. The first question is, what is the rationale behind the pedagogy at Kriya and how does it encourage pluralistic thinking? Soumyadeep Roy has asked this question from La Martiniere for Boys School in Kolkata.
Thank you, Swamijit. I think this was answered when Dr. Rajan has asked this by a previous questionnaire, that, the traditional style is you do a deep dive, even at the undergraduate, into individual disciplines. But when you look at the world's problems, whether it's climate change, whether it's nuclear proliferation, whether it's poverty, whether it's human rights, they don't respect disciplinary boundaries. Problems don't care whether you're a physicist or a chemist or a biologist. They do require specialized knowledge. And so the way I think we evolved Kriya's interwoven learning is oftentimes interesting breakthroughs happen at the frontiers or the Venn diagrams of disciplines, right? So I'll take my own discipline as an economist. I'm a development economist, and I think I'm a better economist today because I had mentors who really pushed me to study physics and history and politics and philosophy. Now, I'm not going to pass myself off as a physicist or as a biologist or a political scientist, But the idea of being open-minded and using concepts and collaborators from those disciplines in order to become a better economist, that's really what we're looking at, right? And so the idea of interwoven itself is the fact. So let me give you a practical example. You will see in the skills list of Krea, when you go to the website of Core and Skills, there's a course called Ethical Decision Making. And so every student at Krea, and if you were to join in your first year, you will study a course on how do I make ethical decisions. Doesn't mean you have to always be right and wrong. Nobody's asking you to be a Gandhi or a Mother Teresa or anybody you respect so much. It's the idea of how do I, when confronted, how do I even go about asking the kinds of questions I need to in order to make an ethical decision. That's really what the purpose of the course is. So it's really a skills-based course. It's really getting you to think, how do I think ethically, right? Now, in many universities, you may have this, and you do. But then it becomes a checkbox. So, okay, I've done it. Now let me go on to do my economics major. So there is another page on the website called Guiding Principles, which the Academic Council and I came up with 4 years ago, which the faculty have perfected now, where there are 8 or 9 things which we feel, and if you look at once again the logo of Kriya, it's like a thread that weaves, it sort of bobs in and out, right? So and one of the guiding principles is ethics. So you've done the ethical decision course, but then let's say you're doing biology. What the guiding principle says is that the various guiding principles of historicity, research methods, focus on data, but one of them is ethics. So in other words, when you're studying biology, your faculty have curated the major such that these guiding principles are woven in and out of the major so that ethical decisions will be brought back up when you're a biology student. Because when you're a biologist, the question of ethics is quite different than if you're a political science student, right? So the idea is of interwoven is not only are disciplines woven together sometimes, it's the fact that you see this concepts being threaded and coming through in and out. And that's what we believe gives you a sense of how to tackle really challenging problems, which rarely respect pure boundaries, especially the undergraduate stage. When you go to graduate school or even advanced undergraduate and graduate school, you will start specializing. But in the first few years, we really don't believe that that's where you learn the most.
Thank you, Dr. Ramaswamy. And I think the overarching theme, I think that has been addressed, so I don't want to ask that separately, which was about, what makes Kriya different. And I think through the words of Dr. Rajan and your own address, I think that's come out quite amply through the session. But the other interesting question, and I think we'll make this the last question for this evening, just before I ask that question, I want to let all the participants know, especially parents and students, that there is an academic open house which is scheduled for the 20th of March. It's at 6 p.m. where you will have an opportunity to interact with all the divisional chairs of the 3 divisions that we offer, as well as the Office of Career Services, admissions, and student life. So make sure that you attend it. You will receive an email inviting you for this tomorrow morning. So do attend it to get all your other questions answered. But the last question for you, Dr. Ramaswamy, is we have so many acclaimed members of the governing council, and so many distinguished people who are part of, how we do what we do. The question really is, how do they really make a difference to the way we learn and teach at Kriya? What is their contribution, when you get down to it? What is really their contribution in the way Kriya delivers its pedagogy?
So I think that's an easy question to answer. I think members of the Academic Council, the Governing Council, the Board of Management, which are the 3 bodies that sort of govern the workings of Kriya, so to speak, they take part in sessions like today, right? So various members of the Governing Council have interacted with prospective admits and also current students. They come to campus, so they actually interact with them. They are on panels when I'm selecting faculty. So they give their time. And remember, these are all voluntary positions. They give their time when we are selecting faculty, which is one of the most crucial you think about the university, it sits on it's a three-legged stool, right? Students is one huge critical one, which is what you are. The second is curriculum, and the third is faculty and staff, the faculty who actually make the curriculum come to life. So in order to choose the kind of caliber faculty we have, which is pretty remarkable, I would say, and having had experience of hiring faculty both in the US and here over the last few decades, the Krea faculty are really, really very strong. And the process through which they get selected is very unique and very rigorous, much like your admissions process. And the faculty play that role, as you know, in your KICs, for instance. They actually do the job of selection. In many universities, it's done by the admissions team. It's not done by the faculty. To select the faculty, I rely on outside experts, but I also rely on expertise of my academic council and board of management members who actually sit through days of interviews. And so they bring in their own perspective from their own walks of life to ask questions about, will you be a right fit for the university? So they do that. They open doors through internships in their companies or through their organizations for our students, right? So they provide contacts because they have confidence in the kinds of students Kriya puts together, and they have the confidence to call one of their companies or organizations or some well-wisher and say, hey, you should take a look at this student coming out of Krea. And of course, the last thing is they believe in the vision and the mission. And I've often said that Krea's vision is great. And I'm biased, of course, but a vision without resources is a hallucination. And resources is time, talent, which I've talked about, but it's also money, right? We are a non-for-profit university. We don't get funding from the government. So we raise money from donors for things like financial assistance for students who can't afford Krea, for paying for capital projects, for underwriting faculty research, and so on. So that comes from donors many of whom are parts of the governing council and the academic council and the boards of management, right? So I think it's a way to think of it. They give their expertise, they give their time, and they give their wealth. I think those are the ways in which they tangibly contribute to your well-being and your improvement. And of course, they, as a board, they keep me and my team in line because the governance structure is such that I report to the board and they will want to know. So for instance, I'll give you a very simple example. This past year, so many students were stranded in their hometowns, and many of them just did not have access to electricity and connectivity. And we were online, and we have been online. And there have been times when I've had to intervene. I picked up the phone and spoke to sort of the landlord or the moneylender in a village in UP, so that a kid who was sharing a house with 10 other family members could come to the marriage hall to study. And there were other incidents where we brought some students back when we were allowed by the government to campus. And one of my board members at the last meeting was just so touched. And she kept saying this. She said, I can't believe that you were brought, because I know the student and I know the difficulty she was having. I'm glad that you sent a dongle over to her. You underwrote her electricity charges. I mean, these are all things that we would do because that's where Kriya believes in its mission. But this board member was so taken that she went ahead and further wanted to help with the scholarship of that student. Right? So there are different ways in which different board members, given their own professional background, their own interests, they really help because they care about the students, they care about the mission. And so anything that advances the mission of the university, I can pick up the phone and call. And the fact that Dr. Rajan was able to come today, extremely busy individual, but I think when we approached him and said, look, we wanted to do this program as a special program for the admits of round 1 and 2, even though technology makes it easier, but time is scarce and busy people have way too many options. But he was able to give his undivided time because I think he believes in Kriya. I think that's sort of the proof is in the pudding. So
I think I think succinctly, if you were to just sum it up, you use 3 words: expertise, time, and wealth. And I think that pretty much sums up how the academic council, especially the governing council, is involved with Kriya. And yes, they are also involved with Kriya because they believe in Kriya. And, we are all here because we believe in what the university is doing. And we are really looking forward to welcoming all of you to hopefully on campus, but well, it's uncertain at this point, so I will not say much more than that. But yes, thank you so much, Dr. Ramaswamy, once again for your time this evening. I know that you have a lot of other engagements as well. So thank you for joining us. I thank all the parents, students, and educators for being here, all our colleagues from Kriya. And if you have questions that have not been answered, please feel free to write to ask@kriya.edu.in. You can alternatively contact your regional counselor, you know who they are, or you can also join us on the 20th of March at 6 p.m. and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you and congratulations. Have a good evening.